Good morning and welcome. I had to take a minute to make sure that we had everything set and ready to go. Since we're doing the online and the in-person, we have to make sure that the computer is set up properly and the camera is set up properly, and we press record and make sure that all our things are in place. It just makes it a few added things that we have to do to make this practice kind of accessible. I mean, it's beautiful that we can do this online, and I know that we've had a lot of people that join us that couldn't join us from before, from all over the world. My name is Koten. It translates to solitary sky. And I think maybe first I wanted to talk a little bit about bodhicitta. And this, a lot of the time, this is kind of one of the first talks that a student will do. The bodhicitta is the way-seeking mind. I've been a student of Kwong-roshi for a little over 15 years, and I've spent that time here at the Zen Center as a resident. Had an opportunity to be in several different positions in my time here. I've been the cook or the tenzo, and I did that for 10 years or so, maybe more. And right now I'm the work leader and kind of in charge of, all of the grounds and putting volunteers to work and retreatants to work when they come to visit us. But as far as this way-seeking mind, I know I've told this story before, but maybe it clarifies for me each time that I tell it or each time that I bring it up, because it's come up many times in my life. And this is when I was a young lad, high school age. I used to like to go up on the roof of the garage and, look out at the stars at night and the moon and contemplate things like, where infinity, or where does it end? Or if it ends, there's got to be something beside, outside that box. Thinking about my own creation and the creation of the universe. I grew up as a Christian, and I was the normal boy trying to do my own thing and kind of push back against that a little bit. But there was a time, and it was about this time that I really wanted to take a closer look at that, to see if there was something there for me. But it was always very hard for me to see, if there is creator, then what's beyond that. And this is all just our conceptual thinking. But as I was laying there one night, it struck me that, no creator, and how beautiful is it that things are just as they are, just because that's how they are. So this is like everything independent and yet working right together. And we've been studying the Sandokai, and I think that I just summed up the Sandokai in those few words. But everything as one, but working together without this consciousness behind it that's setting it in motion, that there's no intention behind it. 40 some years ago, when this hit me, I couldn't describe it. It was just that flash. And then you try to conceptualize it or quantify it, and it would fall away. And so this brings me to the point in my talk where I like to bring up some rock and roll wisdom in the Buddhist sense. I've done this with Bob Marley and with David Bowie, and now let's do the Pink Floyd. So there's a song, Comfortably Numb. And this was probably a song that was around about that time when I was looking at the stars and the moon. But he says, when I was young, I had a fleeting glimpse out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, but it was gone. I cannot put my finger on it now. The child is grown and the dream is gone. And it's still like, it gives me this, because that's it. We know, and in this practice, we know, but it's just outside of our sight or our reach. Roshi talks about the sutras, and I remember he said this one time, and I knew what he was talking about. The sutras coming into you through the back of your head. And this is not us looking directly at something. This is something that's seeping in without our intention. I think, you know, the view of the moon and the sun and the earth, well, and everything else, but just moving without intention, and just moving because that's the way it moves. The moon isn't revolving around the earth, it's just revolving, just moon revolving. So I think sort of one thing I'd like to keep in mind throughout this talk, and each of these little circles on here are kind of talking about the same thing. And that's this, it could be, the Sandokai translates as the intimacy of the relative and the absolute. And maybe what I'm talking about is sort of that intimacy that we might have with our relative minds to the absolute, and what we do in Zazen and what that means. I had a great opportunity yesterday to do two things that I haven't done in several years. And that was cooking the Friday lunch and raking, preparing the grounds for the Saturday program. The Friday lunch, it was always, we try to make something a little more traditional on Friday. We chant on Fridays, and usually it's more in silence. So we don't normally have a silent lunch during the week. And then most especially, we have dessert then every Friday. So it's a kind of a special time where we sit and we'll talk a little bit afterwards while we're eating dessert and having coffee and doing these decadent things before we go back to work.
Maybe we got cream brulee.
We had creme brulee yesterday.
Come on Fridays.
So this this raking and cooking, first the cooking, to me, you know, I came from a background, you know, I was a chef and I was a cook for 20 years before I came to the Zen Center. And then I was the cook in the Tenso here for the next 10 years. So it's not something that's new to me. But how do we take something that we've done 100 times and make it fresh each time? And this, you know, I was holding this with me yesterday as I was doing this, making some familiar items, and yet trying to be right there with it. Now, as I talked about in this on the rooftop, there's things moving without the intentional activity. It's very hard to kind of cook without intentional activity, because we know that we're cooking for people. We want them to like what we're cooking, or we want it to at least be palatable or healthy. But we don't have to put our own ego on top of that. We don't have to say, boy, I hope everybody really likes this, and I hope they're really happy that I made creme brulee, or you know, I hope I get some merit from this. And we'll talk a little bit more about merit here in just a minute. But then there comes the raking, and the raking. I used to make the joke that I came here on a raking scholarship, because I was the raker, and I got to stay here and rake. But the raking, the first person that showed me how to rake, it was kind of like, well, we do this, and we get all the leaves up. And that's okay. But then, somebody came along and said, it's not about getting the leaves all up. We're just touching the ground with the rake. And this elevated that practice for me. And this, if you can rake without having the goal of getting all the leaves up, if you can rake without having the goal of having a perfectly raked, I did a lot of time thinking about this as I was raking for many years. But one way would be to be very anal about it and make sure that every single piece of gravel was upright. But that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing in our life. And we can't. And it's not what we're doing in Zen. We're not trying to turn everything on its proper face. We touch the ground. So the way to rake is and when Roshi showed me, it's we put the rake down, we put the knives into the ground, and we pull back towards our hara. And we do this over and over again. Now this is kind of like our breath during zazen. We drop it in. And the way that we do it is we make a little hash mark pattern. But again, we're not trying to make the hash mark pattern. We rake this way, and then we rake this way. And magically the leaves go with the rake, and we don't have to worry about it. Sometimes we have to pick up some leaves. But this is, I think this was a good practice of samadhi in raking. So this samadhi is, or actually maybe the definition, if there's a definition of samadhi, it's just like the balanced state for our mind. Maybe single, 1 point concentration. No subject and no object, just there. And I think that I was fortunate to have to be forced to rake for so many years. I think that, I'm afraid that sometimes when the volunteers come up or people come up and I send them out to rake. And for me, sometimes it feels like this too. Like it's just, I need something for you to do, so just rake. And they might think, well, like I thought at first, a man of my stature having to rake, I could be doing something important, something of merit. But that's kind of the wrong thinking, because it's just what we're doing, what our mind is doing when we're doing whatever we're doing. So I'd like to draw our attention, if I can read this, to the red board that hangs back here. This is a verse from Tendo Kaku, which also is Zen Master Huan Shi. And this is a verse that kind of sums up the fascicle, or it's actually a koan about Bodhidharma, who was the first Zen ancestor. Bodhidharma came from India to China, and he went and met the emperor. And so the emperor, who was a very devout Buddhist himself, he said, look at all that I've done. I've built so many temples, and I've propagated Buddhism throughout the land. And, we have we give so much to the practice of Buddhism. He says, how much merit do I get for that? And Bodhidharma says, no merit. So, the emperor is taken aback. And he says, well, who is this talking to me? And Bodhidharma says, don't know. Now, this don't know isn't just Bodhidharma being smarmy. This is don't know. He's trying to show the emperor something. He's telling him something. So eventually Bodhidharma left the emperor. The emperor kind of missed the point. And Bodhidharma went up to the cave at Shaolin, and he sat for 9 years. And so the verse goes, I hope I can get this, goes as this. Now in this, this verse we read, well, let's just go on through this. Wide open and plain, nothing sacred. The meaning of his coming is very different. Exceeding, he swings the axe without injuring the nose. Failing, he drops the pitcher without looking back. Somebody might have to help me here. Oh, wait, I think I got it. All alone, he sat frozen at Shaolin. Silently, he fully demonstrated the true meaning. The clear moon of autumn turns its frosty disk. The faint dipper in the ocean of stars dangles its evening handle. In an unbroken succession or line, ceremonial robe and bowl were passed down to descendants. Thus, humans and devas produced medicine and sickness. The lion's roar is inexhaustible. So I just want to talk about two lines here. The first line and the next to last, which this wide open and plain, nothing sacred. This is what we're talking about. And this is our zazen. There's no intention of activity. It's just activity for itself. Everything, I think we talk about this a lot as toji, the thing is being held as equal, but not that everything is the same, that, but we don't give more merit to the ultra than we would give to the cushions or the gozes. We treat them differently because they're different. But nothing sacred, wide open and plain. And this way, this is this refraining from. Now during Ango and maybe our last study group, we studied the Showaku Makusa. And our Shuso, this last Ango, talked about refraining from. And I will get back to this in a few minutes, but this refraining from is this wide open and plain. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. This is sort of along with no intention, refraining from, or another translation is not committing. We try and hold this as I go through the next couple of areas here. But first, this line, thus humans and devas produce medicine and sickness. To me, this is like a slap in the face. This is very harsh words, because what it means is we created all of this. And it's not that they're harsh words, but it's true reality. We created the need for this. We created the need for all our books on this. Because of humans, we created a need to try to understand the Dharma. We made this all the samsara is on us and because of us. And we have to know this fact. So what we're trying to look at with the first line, wide open and plain, nothing sacred. This is transcending, but maybe more penetrating through that knowledge back to just this, or suchness, as they talk about. So Dogen Zenji, the picture is in the back. He, in the Shobogenzo, one of the fascicles, one of the many fascicles in the Shobogenzo is the Showaku Makusa. And Showaku Makusa, this is where the term refraining from or not committing comes from. And Dogen drove this point home. And this calls back to our precepts as well. But Shohaku Makusa is refraining from evil. So, and this is kind of a paraphrase, but not committing various evils, carrying out good actions, is personally clarifying this mind. Now, these translations, one comes from Daitsu Tom Wright, and one from Nishijima. I kind of put them both together to try to understand this. What Dogen is talking about, and what we're talking about when we talk about the precepts, originally, and from one viewpoint, it's very, very relative. It's very, very cut and dry. Don't kill, don't do evil, do good, clarify your mind. On one level, and at certain times throughout throughout the history of Buddhism, that was very important. The Mahayana view, however, penetrates a little bit more deeply than that. And what Dogen says is that there's just refraining from. Because refraining from includes refraining from the various evils. That is it. So when we say refraining from, there's no dots behind it. It's not refraining from or refraining from. It's just refraining from. That sentence stands alone, or that saying. Nishijima talks about it as not committing, and Dogen says this, just those words, 10 times within a couple of paragraphs in Shohaku Makusa. So what he wants us to see is that we're not, and I used to think of it as transcending, like beyond good and evil, like Nietzsche, but not so much transcending, because we can't get out of that. We can't get out of, yes, there is, don't do bad, do good. But no, we're not transcending it, but we're penetrating more deeply than that. And this is our Zazen. This is the Zazen is without an intentional activity. So we're not trying to become Buddha. We're not trying to become a better person. We're not trying to become calm. We're not trying to slow our breathing. There's no intention to it. It's just refraining from. This is all we have to do. This in itself is the teaching of Mahayana Buddhism. Just refraining. We carry out our activity just for that activity. In Roshi's book, he talks about doing for the thing itself. And if we can work, this goes back to the raking. We're not trying to make a beautiful path. We're just touching the ground. We just do for the thing itself. And we don't worry about what people are going to think about it. Maybe people will say, yay, we have creme brulee. But that's extra. We have a study group that we're doing on Tuesdays, and we're studying Suzuki Roshi's Branching Streams Flow in the Darkness, which is a series of talks that he gave at Tassajara about the Sandokai, or the intimacy of relative and absolute. And there was a part in it where we talked a little bit about the precepts. And we had, the question comes up, well, we understand this penetrating, or maybe a deeper meaning of the precepts, because, the precepts originally were probably very necessary. People didn't know that you shouldn't kill. Maybe they didn't know that you shouldn't do these bad things. But the Mahayana view goes into a little deeper than that. And it's not just It's not just a way to say, well, you know, yeah, but we're going to do this instead and justify it. It's not a justification of it. It's an actually maybe, you know, it's more close to how the Buddha would look at it. And it's this refraining from. So they say, you know, to eat meat or to not eat meat. And it's said that, you know, eating meat violates the precepts and not eating meat violates the precepts. And how could this be so? That's that's a valid question, because in this world, in our realm, yeah, it needs to be this or that. You know, which one is it? You know, how can I live my life this way? But it's what's in our mind when we eat the meat, or it's what's in our mind when we don't eat the meat. If it's this refraining from, and I'll keep using that, if it's the not committing, it's not about not committing a violation of the precepts. It's about not raising the idea of violating the precepts. So with that, I have, it was funny the other day when I was getting ready to do the talk, I thought, well, you know, I could just look at all of the different things that are on my walls and just take things down. So I got one anyway. But this is the one mind precepts of Bodhidharma, and this is hung on my wall, I don't know, for 5 years or more, maybe more. But this kind of talks about the same thing, and you know, in a very, very straightforward way, because we get to see this non-intentional action in action. So the 10 characteristics of our inconceivably wondrous nature in the instruction to receive is to transmit. To transmit is to awaken. And to awaken the Buddha mind is called true Jukai. So these precepts are the precepts that we take in the ceremony when we're asked to take Jukai. And also, if people tune in during Ango, we do the Fusatsu ceremony, and it's a precept ceremony where we go through this as well. And I'll just read a couple of them so we can get the idea, and just hold on to the idea of refraining from. So self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the infinite Dharma. Not raising the view of extinction is called not killing. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the ungraspable Dharma. Not arousing the thought of gain is called not stealing. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the inexplicable Dharma. Not expounding a word is called not lying. So in each one of these, and it's been said before, if we hold one of the precepts, you hold all of the precepts. And I never understood that, because I said, you know, how could I, you know, what if I'm killing, but I'm eating the wrong thing? I don't know. You know, how could that be so? But because of this refraining from, remember, we're not saying refraining from this, refraining from that. If we hold that, this is our zazen. If we hold that, then everything's okay. It includes the whole universe. So I don't know whether it's okay to eat meat or not eat meat, but it's a good discussion. It's a good discussion to have. But if we get caught in our discussions, I think that you know, that's part of the trap as well. I always know I can tell when I'm having, what is it? Maybe, I don't know what to call it. Maybe I'm off the path, or maybe when I'm wrong. It's not quite that. Maybe when I'm missing the point. I can tell because I'm very adamant about something. Maybe I found something and that's got to be taken care of, or it's got to be done. Because I know it's just from my viewpoint. That's just what I'm thinking right now. So if we can, if I can let go of that, transcend, penetrate, it all opens up. I've had this experience all the time of being very convicted in something and indignant and just, man, this has got to stop. And then, a half an hour later, it's like, what was I even thinking about? So we have to be careful what we really get into about ourselves, the story that we tell about ourselves and a story that we tell about others. Because we're just kind of putting them in that box, and the box isn't real. I had brought along Kwong-roshi, and there's a poem that he does, and we've done this poem a lot. But when the Shuso was talking about this, see, I can't even remember. I've said it like 20 times. This refraining from, and we talked shortly about this refraining from. What came to mind was the beginning of the acupuncture needle of Zazen, and this is a poem by Kwong-roshi. It just describes Zazen, or maybe the state in Zazen, or that samadhi of Zazen. It's mainly just the first couple. Actually, I'm going to read the whole thing, but we'll stop after the first few lines just to let that sink in. So, the essential function of all Buddhas, the functional essence of all ancestors, is to know without touching things and illuminate without encountering objects. Knowing without touching things, this knowledge is innately subtle. Illuminating without encountering objects, this illumination is innately miraculous. The knowledge, innately subtle, is never engaged in discriminative thinking. The illumination, innately miraculous, has never displayed the slightest identification, never engaging in discriminating thinking. This knowledge is rare without match. Never displaying the most minute identification, this illumination is complete without grasping. The water is clear right down to the bottom. Fish easily swim on. The sky is vast without end. Birds fly far into the distance. So maybe to come back around, I wanted to talk about the raking once again. So this raking, where we're not trying to do anything, or the cooking, we're not trying to make people happy. But I had this experience while raking, that I would try to hold that in mind, hold that samadhi, that just touch the ground. One time, one breath. And I did the entire, front part of the lot. We do all of the front, from the parking lot in and then all the way up to the sendo. And we usually go down and do the path coming up as well. And I did the entire thing just trying to keep that in mind, maybe being mindful. It's to use that term, being mindful of just like Roshi said, but feel the knives and go in, you listen to the gravel and you breathe in, then you pull it towards your heart over and over and over and over again. And I didn't look at what I was doing at all. So it was basically just this, not trying to make anything look good. And when I finished, I looked up and it was like bright and shining. And I didn't try to do it. It was just everything just leading right up to the sendo, up to the path. It was beautiful. And it was done without having to think about, well, I couldn't possibly have done it if I was like, hey, let's make it look bright and shining and extra special today. Because then it would just be me doing that. It's not really what happens. Well, okay. What's happening out here is what's happening in here. I think that's enough. Maybe if there's any questions, I guess we could do a question or two. For questions from online, we have, I think the speaker is on. You could just unmute yourself and shout it out.
I noticed the raking when I came. I don't know if anybody else notices. Huh? Did you? It's interesting. It's very ordinary things that, well, like he's talking about the raking. I mean, who would have thought? But raking is raking samadhi or just raking. You can find your true nature if you continue the practice. And the practice about breathing. We don't know how to breathe. There's a certain way we have to relearn how to breathe, because that regulates the mind, and the mind regulates the body. So yeah, I appreciate raking, because I raked before Koten for 10 years, and it taught me that, and it's not that you're going to rake the ground's going to rake you. There's a relationship, there's an intimacy between the subject and the object. The object's going to rake you if you're there to receive it. Then you understand the ground is not just flat, it goes this way, goes that way. There's a lot of teaching in this, such a simple thing that this world of technology, computers, iPhones, that has no wisdom and no compassion about living. Yeah, this is a good talk, Coach, and I'm really enjoying it. And next Friday will we have brulee?
I don't know. We'll see. Don't look forward to it though.
Yeah. I'll refrain from. Okay.